Hey girls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be my most anticipated releases of July. I have been doing one of these every single month in the year of 2021. However, I will say briefly before I get started, this is by no means an all-encompassing list. Obviously, there are so many books coming out. Sometimes they slip through my radar or I have the wrong release date, what have you. So if you feel like I missed a July release, leave it down below for me so I can check it out. And also, there aren't a lot of books on my list for July, but they are some of my most anticipated releases of the entire year. So while our stack of books might be a little bit smaller than previous months, I am very, very excited about all of the books in July. Some of them, like I said, might be new favorites, are definitely some of my most anticipated books for the year. So let's just go ahead and get started. I will be leaving information for all of the books, like with their release dates and everything, in the description bar below, as well as they will be on the screen with me while I am talking about them. So first book that is coming out in July, which I'm so excited for, is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This comes out July 13th by Berkeley Books, and boy, am I very, very excited for its release. So this one is following, like the title suggests, a support group for final girls. In horror movies, the final girl is the one who's left standing when the credits roll. It's one of, I feel like, the most endearing horror movie tropes, but after the sirens fade and the audience moves on, what happens to her? This is following our main character, Lynette Tarkington, and she's a real-life final girl that survived the massacre, and she's in a support group with a bunch of other different final girls. They are in a support group together. They have a mutual therapist where they're all trying to work past their trauma until one girl goes missing and they realize that they might be next. And they might have to confront a killer as their lives take a scary horror movie turn once again. So I'm very excited for this one. Grady Hendrix is one of my favorite horror authors. I've seen a lot of people be a little bit hesitant about this one because on its first kind of glance over, it does seem very similar to Final Girls by Riley Sager. I believe Stephen Graham Jones also has a book that deals with the final girl trope. However, this sounds more of like the premise that I was hoping for in Final Girls. So without giving that book away, Final Girls by Riley Sager, that one did deal with the final girl trope, but it didn't deal with like the group of final girls as much as I was hoping for. This one seems like it is very centric around a group, so I'm hoping it does deal more on the aspect of a group of women working together, as well as like the final girl trope in and of itself. It is a trope, but ones that like horror directors in terms of movies have really transformed, and it can be done in new and interesting ways. Just reading the synopsis, even though the names sound similar, this does sound very, very different from Final Girls by Riley Sager. And while I do enjoy Riley Sager's work as a whole, I definitely feel like his books are thrillers and not horror, whereas Grady Hendrix is more on the horror side of things. So I definitely think they're going to be two very different books, and I'm just very excited for it. Grady Hendrix has written some of my favorite books recently, and just in terms of horror, My Best Friend's Exorcism, one of my favorite horror books, as well as I really did enjoy the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. So I am looking forward to this one. I love a good final girl in a movie. I have a feeling I'm really going to enjoy this one as well. Next up, we have A Psalm for the Wild-Built Monk and Robot, book number 1 by Becky Chambers. This comes out July 13th by Tor, and this is Becky Chambers' newest series. It has been centuries since the robots of Earth gained self-awareness and laid down their tools. Centuries since they wandered into the wilderness, never to be seen again. One day, though, the life of a tea monk is upended by the arrival of a robot, there to honor the old promise of checking in. The robot cannot go back until the question of what do people need is answered, but the answer to that question depends on who you ask and how. Becky Chambers' new series asks, in a world where people have what they want, does having more matter? I went ahead and read the entire synopsis on that one because I still don't entirely know what we're getting into in this series. I have read Becky Chambers before. I absolutely loved her. She's a new discovery discovery author for me this year, so I am very much looking forward to seeing this one because what I've read from her has been excellent sci-fi, but it's been primarily dealing in space and space travel. This one seems like it's more of like a post-apocalyptic sort of book, like it's in our world, but it's on our planet and it's in like the far future, so very interested to see where this goes. Becky Chambers does have really good discussions of like the human experience, so I think this is going to be a very fascinating series with a lot to say. Next up, we have The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. This comes out also July 13th by Putnam Books, and this is Get Out meets Danielle Vega in this YA horror where survival is not a guarantee. Jake Livingston is one of the only black kids at St. Clair Prep, one of the others being his infinitely more popular older brother. It's hard enough fitting in, but to make matters worse and definitely more complicated, Jake can see the dead. So not only is Jake not the most popular kid at his school, has troubles fitting in, he can see ghosts, and there's also a ghostly plot that he discovers that could put kids in his high school in real danger, so he has to become like this ghost hunter even though he just wants to be a normal kid, and high school soon becomes a survival game when Jake is not sure he's going to win. I really enjoy ghost books, and this just sounds like it's going to be almost in terms of like maybe sort of like a Buffy feel, just in terms of like a teenager that has extra abilities, and you kind of have to balance that school and then that otherworldly duty that you have. And also, since it is comp titled to Get Out, then I'm sure there is going to be a lot of discussions of similar themes. I do love a good social commentary horror, so I'm very intrigued by this one. I feel like I've seen a lot of TV shows that have to deal with like the teenagers versus regular teenage things, but also supernatural, but I haven't really read about it in books too much, so I am looking forward to that one. Next up, we have These Hollow Vows. These Hollow Vows, book number 1 by Lexi Ryan. This comes out July 20th by HMH. This is The Cruel Prince meets A Court of Thorns and Roses in this action-packed fantasy about a girl who is caught between two treacherous fairy courts and their dangerously seductive princes. It sounds like it's a fantasy book having to deal with fae, having to deal with love triangles. I'm gonna be honest, this book was put on my radar simply because of how much I did enjoy A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. I really enjoyed this one. This was another fae story. I've never really read any fae stories. Like, I haven't read The Cruel Prince, haven't read A Court of Thorns and Roses series either, but I did really enjoy Dark and Hollow Star. That was a new release having to deal with like the Seelie and Unseelie court and fae drama, and I really enjoyed it. This one just sounds like it's gonna be a whole lot of fun. Based on the synopsis, I'm going to guess that it deals more with like the love triangle and romance rather than the fantasy plot, but that's okay. I'm always here for a good time. This just sounds like it's going to be a really fun book to read, and I believe it is a duology, and the tagline is "A heart is a dangerous thing to steal," so maybe we'll have some like sort of spy espionage sort of thievery going on as well. And last but most certainly not least, and one of my most anticipated books of the year, She Who Became the Sun, The Radiant Emperor, book number 1 by Shelley Parker Chan. This comes out July 20th by Tor Books. This is gender-bent Mulan meets the Song of Achilles, an accomplished poetic debut of war and destiny sweeping across an epic alternate China. I've heard that if you've loved the Poppy War series, you're going to love this book. Early reviews are raving about this book. It sounds absolutely fascinating. So briefly, because again, I feel like fantasy synopsises are very hard to tie down when you haven't read it. Like, I don't want to give any spoilers, and as a book reviewer, I feel like it's easier once I've read the book to give a synopsis rather than to try and explain a book before I've read it. But this follows two different children who are given two very different fates. It's a historical retelling for fans of the Poppy War with a very strong military reimagining sort of bias, so it is fantasy, but it's very military fantasy. It's ancient China, alternate ancient China in the Ming Dynasty, and it's about our main character overcoming the odds to fight against Mongol rule. My guess from reading reviews of people that I really trust who have already read this. They say ignore the Song of Achilles. I'm going to keep it in just because I haven't read it yet. I have a feeling it's because this is a very queer book and it is kind of like a retelling, and I've heard it's beautifully written, so that's probably the only thing that it's similar. I've seen a lot of people saying it's way more similar to The Poppy War, and it turns out that the cover artist also, illustrated the cover art to the Poppy War trilogy, so that could explain also some of the immediate striking resemblances. I know it's very dangerous for me to compare it to the Poppy War because the Poppy War is one of my favorite series of all time, so very high expectations for this book. I have a really good feeling about it. This just sounds like a really wonderful, dark military fantasy reimagining of some real world events. All of those are fantasy buzzwords for me. It's the type of fantasy that I've really been enjoying at the moment, so I'm very excited to pick this one up. And there you have it. Those are the 5 books that I'm most looking forward to coming out in the month of July. If I missed any, leave them down below. Let me know what your most anticipated release for the month of July is. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to my channel for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!